In that corner of New Mexico territory, people liked to tell the story backward. They said the richest sheepman on the mesa married the woman nobody else would take. But before it became a love story, it was just a dusk road, two dust-covered children, and a mother trying to survive one more refusal. By the time Tala reached Rowan Cade's gate, she already knew the pause. It was the silence men used when they noticed the children. She had heard it at trading posts, at kitchen doors, at ranch bunkhouses, and at the edge of the camps where widowers wanted a wife. But not the hunger that came holding onto her skirt. At 23, Tala was still striking enough to make a man look twice. Then they saw Mika and Anna, boy and girl, 5 years old, dirty-cheeked, hollow-eyed, trying very hard not to ask whether this door would close like the rest. Tala could work harder than most men who dismissed her. She could mend harness, smoke meat, patch a roof, doctor a hen, cut soap, stitch wool sacks, and settle a nervous horse without losing her temper. But none of that mattered once people counted the children. In the world she lived in, a young woman alone might still be considered desirable. A young woman alone with 2 children was considered a problem. So she stopped at Rowan Cade's ranch, not because she believed in mercy, but because the sky was draining into iron blue, the wind was turning cold, and the children were stumbling from exhaustion. Cade's spread stood above the scrub and cottonwoods like something built to outlast weather. Long adobe house, big barn, sheep pens stretching down toward the wash, straight fencing, good timber, money in every line of it. Rowan was 31, unmarried, and talked about in 3 counties with that particular mix of envy and suspicion reserved for a man who had land, skill, and no one close enough to soften him. Some said he was proud, some said he was hard, some said solitude had become his religion. Tala climbed the porch with the children pressed against her dress. She could feel her pulse in her throat. She had rehearsed this moment all afternoon. Do not beg, do not sound broken, ask for work, not pity. When the door opened, Rowan Cade filled the frame in lamplight. Broad shoulders, dark coat, a face cut by wind and sun and too many seasons spent outdoors. He said nothing at first. His eyes moved over her once, then to the children, then back to her face. Tala lowered her gaze before that familiar silence could finish forming. "I'm asking for work," she said. "Any work. Cooking, mending, yard work, stock work if you need it. I'll earn our keep. I only need a place for the night." Mika leaned against her leg. Anna had both fists twisted into Tala's skirt. The pause stretched long enough for Tala to feel the old humiliation rising in her chest. She was already shifting her weight, already preparing to turn away before he said what every other man eventually said. "Not here. Not with them. Not my burden." Instead, Rowan stepped back and opened the door wider. "Bring the children inside," he said. "The cold's coming down fast." Tala looked up so sharply it almost hurt. He did not smile. He did not offer comfort. He simply moved aside as if the decision, once made, required no performance. Inside, the house smelled of cedar smoke, coffee grounds, and lamb stew left warming near the fire. The children froze at the sight of the table, the lamp, the thick folded blankets near the hearth. Tala stood rigid, too proud to collapse and too tired not to want to. Rowan set a pitcher of water on the table, then bread, then the stew. The children looked at Tala for permission before they touched anything. When she nodded, they ate with the desperate concentration of children who had learned food could disappear while they were still hoping for it. Tala tried to thank him, but the words came out rough and thin, Rowan only said, "You can sleep in the loft tonight. We'll talk in the morning." That should have been all. One night, a temporary kindness, the sort of mercy that vanishes with daylight. But morning came, and Rowan did not send them away. He walked Tala through the work that needed doing, as if the arrangement were already settled. Wool sacks to patch before shipping, a pantry shelf to repair, hens to feed, a neglected kitchen garden that had to be cleared before first frost. If she knew how to card and sort fleece, there would be more after supper. Tala listened without interrupting. She understood men who held power in their hands and spoke as if every sentence had already been weighed before it left their mouths. "I know the work," she said. Rowan looked at her once, measuring. "I think you do." That became their beginning. Not tenderness, not romance. Work. Tala rose before dawn and proved herself before the sun was high. She mended faster than his last ranch hand. She could turn old cloth useful again. She set the kitchen in order without making a show of it. She gathered eggs, hauled water, trimmed lamp wicks, and learned the rhythms of the place with the instincts of someone who had spent her life studying what needed to be done before anyone spoke it aloud. The children changed first. Mika stopped watching every adult as if expecting to be shouted at. Anna began talking again. By the third day she was following chickens through the yard, laughing whenever they flapped away from her. Rowan said very little to either of them, yet he started leaving small things where they would find them. A smooth striped stone on the porch rail, a wooden whistle carved from cottonwood, a stool by the wash basin so their little hands could reach the water without asking. He never announced these gestures. Tala noticed because she noticed everything. In the evenings, Rowan would sit at the far end of the table, ledgers open, lamplight across his hands, while Tala patched harness or sorted fleece. Sometimes the children fell asleep beside the fire before supper was fully cleared. Sometimes Micah dragged his blanket closer to Rowan's chair without seeming aware he had done it. The house, once silent, began to sound like life. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough. Enough for Tala to grow uneasy, because comfort had become dangerous to her. Hope was worse. Hope taught the body to relax, just in time for the world to strike where it hurt most. And the world did not stay outside for long. When Tala rode into Arroyo Seco for flour and lamp oil, the whispers began before she reached the mercantile counter. Women let their eyes drift over her dress, her children, the supplies stamped with Rowan Cade's account mark. Men pretended not to stare. One of them laughed low enough to force her to hear it, and still deny her the dignity of confronting him. "Cade took in a pretty stray, did he? With the pups, too?" Tala kept her face still, paid for what she had come to buy, and left with her spine straight. But that night, with the children asleep in the loft, and the fire burned low, the words returned. "Pretty stray. With the pups." She stood at the sink, hands in cold water, and hated herself for how much they could still wound her. Rowan must have heard the bucket dip too hard into the basin, because he looked up from the table. "What happened in town?" Tala did not turn around. "Nothing I have not heard before." Rowan closed the ledger. "That isn't an answer." She laughed once, without humor. "It is the only answer women like me usually get." Silence. Then the chair scraped. Rowan crossed the room, not close enough to crowd her, only enough that she could feel another human presence refusing to look away. "When I ask," he said quietly, "I want the true answer." Tala swallowed. They think I came here to trap you. They think my children make me shameful. They think a man loses standing by letting us under his roof. Rowan's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. Town has always needed something to chew on. Yes, Tala said, and women like me are easy meat. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he reached for the broken thread she had been fighting with, took the spool from the shelf beside him, and set a fresh one near her hand. It was a small gesture, but it told her he had heard every word. A week later, the autumn storm came in hard from the mountains. The sky turned green-gray by afternoon. Wind shoved dust under the doors. The sheep crowded the lower fences, restless before the rain. By sunset, thunder was rolling over the mesa like wagon wheels over plank boards, and Anna had gone pale with fear. Tala gathered both children near the hearth and began singing in Apache, low and steady, the same song her mother had used when storms rattled their camp at night. Her voice was not beautiful in the polished way saloon singers were beautiful. It was better than that. It was useful, grounded, a voice built to carry fear somewhere safer. From the doorway, Rowan watched without interrupting. The children's breathing slowed. Anna's fists loosened. Micah, who tried so hard to be brave, finally leaned against Tala's shoulder and let himself be small. At dawn, the storm had ripped half the south fence loose and driven 3 lambs into the wash. Rowan was already outside when Tala tied on her shawl and followed him into the mud. She climbed the torn rails with soaked skirts, hauled wire with blistering hands, and crouched in brown water to help lift a shivering lamb from the reeds. Mud streaked her face. Rain ran off her braid. She never once asked to be spared the worst of the work. When it was over, Rowan stood breathing hard beside the repaired fence, rainwater dripping from the brim of his hat. "You didn't have to come out here," he said. Tala pushed wet hair from her cheek. "Neither did you." One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. That was the first time she saw respect appear plainly in his face. After that, something subtle changed between them. Not enough for either of them to name, but enough that the pauses no longer felt empty. Rowan began asking her opinion on practical things, whether to trade early wool now or hold for a better rail price, whether the kitchen roof needed patching before winter, whether the upper pasture grass would keep another month. Tala answered carefully at first, then with more confidence when she realized he was not humoring her. At night he spoke a little more. Not much, never much, but in fragments she learned him. A father dead young, a mother buried 3 winters later, a little brother lost to fever before his 10th birthday. Since then, Rowan had built land, barns, fences, flocks, and an entire life designed to need no one. It had made him capable. It had also made him solitary enough that silence settled on him like a second coat. Tala understood that kind of survival, which is why the darkest moment came not from cruelty, but from the terrible possibility of losing what had begun to feel like shelter. The first frost hit early, and both children fell sick within 2 days. At first it was coughs and flushed cheeks. By the second night, Micah was burning with fever, and Anna could not keep water down. Tala sat between them in the loft with a basin, a rag, and the cold certainty that she was about to watch her whole life be taken from her twice in one season. She had no money for a doctor, no family close enough to send for, no right, in any honest sense, to ask Rowan for more than he had already given. Downstairs she could hear him moving before dawn, pulling on boots, loading the lantern, saddling a horse. She climbed halfway down the ladder. "Where are you going?" "For Dr. Bell. It's 30 miles in sleet. He kept fastening his coat. Then I'll have a cold ride. Rowan. He looked up at her then, and there was something in his face she had not seen before. Not pity, not obligation, fear. Stay with them, he said. I'll bring him back. He rode through sleet so sharp it sounded like sand against the shutters. The doctor came by noon. The children would live, he said, if the fever broke by morning. That night, Tala sat with a child on either side of her and understood how dangerous love had become, because once people mattered to you, terror acquired names. By dawn, the fever finally began to turn. Anna slept clean and heavy. Micah asked for water. Tala bowed her head over the blanket and shook so badly she could barely hold the cup. When she went downstairs, Rowan was asleep in a chair by the dead fire, still in his coat, boots mud-caked, one hand hanging open at his side. He had not even made it to his bed after bringing the doctor home. Something inside her broke then, not from pain, but from the unbearable tenderness of seeing what a man had done without asking for witness. And because she knew how the world worked, that tenderness frightened her more than hunger ever had. The next afternoon, while the children slept, Tala began packing. Not everything, only what mattered. 2 dresses, a blanket, the children's extra stockings, the small carved whistle Rowan had left by the door for Micah. She folded each item carefully, because careful hands were the only way to keep from falling apart. Rowan found her with the bundle half tied. His eyes moved from the bag to her face. Why? Tala forced herself to keep her voice steady. Because winter is coming. Because town talks. Because a man can ride 30 miles for a doctor in a storm and still decide later that he has done enough. I will not stay until gratitude turns to resentment. For the first time since she had known him, Rowan answered without pause. Is that what you think this is? I think men get tired, she said. I think kindness has limits. I think I have crossed too many thresholds where hope was allowed in for one night and put out in the morning. Rowan took off his gloves slowly, like a man trying not to mishandle something fragile. I did not bring you in because I felt sorry for you. Tala could not answer. He stepped closer. I brought you in because the moment those children came through that door, this house stopped sounding like a grave. Her throat tightened. Rowan looked past her toward the loft where the children were sleeping. I have spent years with enough land, enough money, enough wool, enough horses, and not one good reason to come back inside after sundown. Then your girl laughed at my chickens. Your boy started trailing me to the pens like a shadow. You sang in a storm, and the whole place changed. He drew a breath. So no, this is not charity, and it is not pity. If you leave, don't do it to spare me. Tala stared at him with tears she refused to let fall. That should have settled it. Instead, it opened the next danger. Because private truth is one thing, public choice is another. The test came a few days later in town. Rowan had to sign the winter freight contract and insisted Tala come with him because the children were still weak and he would not leave them alone. They stood outside the mercantile beneath a hard white sky while wagons rattled past and men talked prices near the hitching rail. That was when Ezra Pike rode up. Pike owned the spread east of the wash and had the kind of face that sharpened when other people were vulnerable. He looked Tala over with open contempt, then turned to Rowan as if she were already beneath notice. So the stories are true, he said. You're staking your name on a woman no decent house would keep and 2 children who don't belong to you. Everything around them seemed to go still. Tala felt Micah's hand clamp around her fingers. Anna pressed against her skirts. She had spent years preparing for this exact humiliation. What undid her was not Pike's cruelty. It was the fresh terror that Rowan might choose silence. Not because he agreed, because men often found silence cheaper than courage. Pike kept talking, loud enough now for the porch and hitching rail and open wagon behind them to hear. "You've built a respectable place, Cade. Don't throw it away on a camp cast-off and her bastards." The word landed like a slap. Tala did not realize she had stepped back until she felt the mercantile wall against her shoulders. Rowan's face changed so little that an untrained eye might have missed it. But Tala saw his stillness harden. He took one step forward, then another. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that everyone nearby had to lean into it. "That woman has worked harder under my roof than half the men in this county have worked in their own names." Pike smirked. "That doesn't make her fit to stand beside you." Rowan did not look away. "I wasn't asking your permission." Pike opened his mouth again, but Rowan cut clean across him. "I am keeping her," he said. "I am keeping those children. And any man here who wants to speak against them can speak against me first." No one moved. No one laughed. Pike's expression faltered for the first time. Then Rowan did something Tala would remember for the rest of her life. Bent down and held out a hand to Micah, then to Anna. The children looked at Tala. Her entire chest was burning. When she nodded, they went to him. Rowan drew them to his side and faced the street with both children under his arm, as if daring the whole town to mistake them for unwanted again. It was not a speech. It was not a performance. It was a choice, made where everyone could see it and judge it and fail to move him. Pike muttered something that died before it became a sentence. He pulled his horse around and rode off with humiliation sitting stiff in his shoulders. The street slowly found its noise again, but nothing was the same after that. Not for Tala, not for the children, and not for Rowan, who had crossed the line between private mercy and public devotion without flinching. He asked her to marry him 3 nights later. No grand flourish, no kneeling, no borrowed poetry. Just Rowan standing at the table after the children had fallen asleep, both hands braced against the worn wood, looking at her as if truth was the only language he knew how to trust. "I can offer land," he said. "Work, a good roof, my name if you want it. But more than that, I can offer constancy. I won't open this door one season and close it the next. If you stay as family." Tala's eyes filled before she could stop them. In all her life, men had wanted beauty, labor, comfort, silence, or the illusion of a woman untouched by hardship. Rowan was the first to want the whole truth and remain standing. "Yes," she whispered. They married before winter deepened, under a pale sky and a stand of cottonwoods rattling in the cold. There was no fine church, no crowded feast, no town ladies claiming sudden affection. Just a preacher, 2 children in scrubbed clothes, a man who had finally stopped living like the dead were the only company he deserved, and a woman who had been turned away enough times to understand exactly what it meant to be chosen in daylight. The years that followed were not easy. They were real. Lambing seasons, drought years, broken gates, long nights of work, flour hands and split knuckles, children growing taller against the doorframe, more laughter, more work, more voices inside the house. And that in the end, was the miracle. Not that a lonely rancher took in a beautiful stranger, not that a rejected woman finally found a husband, but that two people the world had taught to expect absence built something steady enough to outlast shame. Long after the gossip thinned and the county found newer scandals to feed on, people still remembered the day Rowan Cade stood in front of a whole town and chose a woman everyone else had treated like a burden. Tala remembered something quieter. A door opening, a warm room, bread on a table. A man who did not promise much, then gave exactly what mattered. Sometimes, dignity does not return in thunder. Sometimes it comes back in the shape of shelter, in the shape of children no longer afraid to eat, in the shape of one steady soul saying, before the whole world can refuse you again, stay.